Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos. Joining me, as always, is my friend Trell.
Howdy.
And my friend Tels.
What's up, guys? We're back.
What's up, guys? Indeed, we are back, as with every week. But this is the last week that we're not going to be live. So starting again next week, we are hopefully going to be live again. Now, because the MDI is almost over for the season. Trell, you have finished. You've played your last MDI match of the season. How did the most recent cup go for you?
Oh, it went all right. We actually placed the same as we did in the first two cups of the season, 4th place. But I was a little disappointed at the end just because we had like one major mistake each match, except for our Hadal. But overall, we did decent, and I'm proud of what we did as a new team. So
yeah, you guys placed 4th every cup, and you needed to get top 4 to go to BlizzCon, but because of the way the points worked, that wasn't 4th every cup in the second season, didn't translate to 4th place overall.
Right, the point system caused our 4th average for the season to place us 5th. So yeah, the BlizzCon dream's dead for this year, but maybe next.
Yeah, and definitely had you been playing together since season 1, you were playing at the level required to go to BlizzCon, so that's consolation. Yeah. Tettles, however, you are not done with the MDI. You are still casting this weekend, the East Cup, an exciting event.
We got 8 teams, dude.
You got 8 teams? That's better than we usually do.
That's one more than 7.
Yeah. I wouldn't count my chickens before they hatch, but we have 8 as it currently stands.
That is fantastic news. So this week we're going to talk about Siege of Boralus. We're going to go in depth on the dungeon. We're going to try and explain most of what we know about it, everything that we could remember to write down before the show about this dungeon. We're going to try and make it friendly to people on audio, so we'll have links to images and clips of what we discuss in the description of the show, so you can go look at those later. And for the most part, we'll try and explain with words everything that you're seeing on the screen as well. But of course, there may be some things that that will be better for the visual side. So definitely looking at those images after, if you can't look at them now, will be a good way to reinforce these things we're saying about this dungeon. But for the most part, I think most of the stuff we can explain with our words, being professional word makers.
I'm sure I think it's a wordsmith.
Yes, crafters of the finest words.
I'm sure we'll miss some things too. There's so much info on every dungeon out there, and part of Mythic Plus is just learning a huge amount of info and what to do with it. So I'm sure we'll miss one little thing or.
Yeah, we're hoping to infuse you with
stuff.
I don't know, like, I feel like if you're just new to keys and you're, like, pretty good at the game mechanically, and you just get into, like, a 15 group or whatever, there's just going to be, like, a bunch of things you don't know about the dungeon, and we're going to try and equip you with a lot of that knowledge, if not all of it, and especially most of the, like, useful knowledge that may not be common, or may be common enough that people use it but don't explain it every run, and that's the kind of thing that I think is really useful to hear about, so that you don't have to learn that the hard way and get kicked out of your pug groups.
And as always, the metas always shift, new seasonal fixes. It kind of also changes week to week, kind of depending on what's going on. So
yeah, and
there's always a little bit of differentiation.
There's kind of a meta for like boss strategies as well, right? Like it goes in and out of favor of like doing a certain number of tentacles on the last platform of this dungeon, right? Or like doing a different number of phases on the second boss, or doing something different with the ads on the first boss. So those strategies kind of change just over time as people have a new idea of what's best, or sometimes they change because of what specs are good, and sometimes they should change based on what specs are in your group. Like the strategy in the second boss in this dungeon, when you had a subtlety rogue in your group, was very different than if you didn't, right? You would let intentionally 6 ads spawn so that you could shuriken combo down the boss.
Yeah, I love the sub rogue.
Yeah.
Strats.
Which delete that shit.
That was a strategy that existed because of a class, and to some extent there are strategic changes you should make based on what classes are in your group. We'll highlight the most outliery of those when we can find them, but for the most part we'll kind of try and stay on the class agnostic side.
Yeah, we're not going to hit on Demon Hunter fucking skips. We're just going to hit on Shroud.
Yeah, although twitch.tv/Zevade, Zevade, if you want to watch a Demon Hunter who can jump over literally every building in every dungeon, that's a place to go, and you'll find just like these pathways. People are like, we don't have Shroud or whatever, and if they just already at the end of the skip, like he's done some kind of double jump. I don't understand. So that's a place to find those Demon Hunter strats.
What's funny about it is it does come in handy, but it's so rare. And when it happens, it's like, what? How did you know you could go all the way to the third boss without getting in combat with anything?
Yeah, like in the Motherload, he just like he'll die in one of the early pulls after you've shrouded, and you'll just be like, "Don't release, we'll res after the pull," and he's just already released and is like halfway over the buildings. Like
he's like up above you in the sky. Yeah, it's funny.
All right, cool. So let's just, I guess, quickly scale back to what we're talking about this week, and let's talk about the reason why we're doing Siege of Boralus this week, because this is not. I mean, obviously, it is our choice to some extent, but this was voted on and discussed by patrons in our Discord. So anybody can join our Discord, but it requires money to become a patron, and that then buys you the right to do multiple different things. And at some tiers, that includes input on what topics we do. And this was one week where that input was very useful. We went into our Discord and asked which dungeons people wanted to hear about. There was a good discussion about a bunch of different dungeons. We've got kind of a couple that were also popular that we'll try and get to as the next couple we do, but Siege seemed like a pretty consensus pick among our patrons, that there's a lot going on here, a lot of information people want about this dungeon, so that's why we picked it. But thanks so much to our patrons for the support, and among those patrons that are the most supportive are Paul, Gyu, Tettles Jr., aka Never Nude, and Ahar of US Proudmoore. Thanks for the continued support. All right, so let's move in to Siege of Boralus, because this is, I guess, yeah, this is the dungeon. This is the show this week. So we've got MDT open on the screen here for anybody watching in video, and we're looking at the first part of the dungeon. And one unique thing about Siege, this is the only dungeon for which this is true, is that the beginning part of this dungeon, actually, and kind of the whole dungeon, but especially the beginning part, is different between the two factions, right? And this is the one dungeon you'll see people play Horde in the MDI because the Horde side is better. Tettles, what's the difference here between Horde and Alliance at the start of the dungeon?
All right, so from my understanding, I've never actually played the Alliance side, but I had to get a decent amount of information for the very beginning of this, because apparently Alliance has these mobs called these bombers, and apparently they're just like straight up just not pullable on higher levels. They will literally just like one-shot you. Beyond that, the first boss doesn't spawn more ads for the Horde, whereas it continuously spawns them for the Alliance. Like basically you just like CC the Vanguard and the Marksman for the Horde, and you just leave them crowd control the whole entire time. It's like a meta strategy. Whereas the Alliance, it like spawns just like a ton of them, which is obnoxious as hell. Horde also gets one extra count for each Footman Gutter combo, which is dumb, but it is also a thing.
Yeah, so because the Alliance has to kill off these gutters, but on the Hordes, so the Alliance early pulls are just worse than the Horde ones. There are a lot of comparable mobs, but like the Scrimshaw gutters here give one count. For the Horde in the same spots, we have Scrimshaw gutters that are fighting Kultiran Footmen, and the gutters get automatically killed and give us that one count as long as we've tagged them. That is an important thing about these gutters, and something that there's this exclamation point for here, is the Footmen instantly kill the gutters whenever the Footmen come in combat with a player. They'll immediately kill the gutter they're fighting. So you need to make sure that you have tagged the gutter before that happens in order to actually get count for them. But if you do that, that's an easy way to get a lot of free count throughout this dungeon. And it doesn't just happen here. It happens later in the dungeon as well. There's all these spots where Footmen are fighting gutters, and you get count from those. So that's an advantage to being Horde.
That part of the dungeon is kind of complex too. The Footman gutters on the Horde side, you have to make sure that you're using an ability that will damage the gutter and the Footman at the same time, or a single target ability that will for sure hit the gutter first. Because if you like run into a pack with Rushing Jadewind on as a tank, it might hit the Footman first, and you lose the count from the gutters if they're placed in that order. Yeah,
so some classes have an easier time at this than others, right? Like Warriors can just kind of run in and Thunderclap, and that hits everything simultaneously, and that works out okay.
For Brewmaster, you have to replicate that by turning off your Jadewind, going into the very middle of the Footman, and then turning it on, so it for sure hits everything at the exact same time.
Right.
Also, Sunfire. If you actually Sunfire off the Footman, and it will instantly kill the gutter, but it won't give you count. So I know there's a lot of Druid players in general.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's something that needs to be like more well known.
Yeah. Because Sunfire only does direct damage to the primary target. The dot application doesn't have a direct damage component, so it doesn't tag immediately. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this alliance pool that they've got here of Irontide Raider and Blacktar Bomber. Apparently, this is the really nasty pull here before the first boss, and this is the reason I think many teams. There are a couple of reasons, but this pull in particular is one of the least friendly pulls in the dungeon. You have Blacktar Bombers and Irontide Raiders that both are pretty one-shotty and can combine to definitely one-shot people. So we got some questions about like how are you supposed to deal with this as Alliance, and the answer is kind of I don't know. This is the one dungeon of the 10 that's worse to be Alliance than Horde.
Yeah.
And that's because the mobs are different. Yeah. So like, Shadow Meld.
I would imagine, I haven't caught up on the Alliance strats recently for this, but I would imagine that you lust and burn the bomber in that pack for sure. Okay, that's the only one you have to deal with. That's with a Raider, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
So all the other bombers, there are other bombers like earlier on in the instance, and if you were running in a coordinated group, you should pretty much try to avoid them at all costs, using your shroud a little bit earlier on to make your way towards towards that first boss area. However, you have to kill that right pack that has that bomber and that Raider in it. And if you are Alliance, especially on a high enough level of a key, you probably should be looking to bloodlust it, because it will probably end up in your demise. It ends up wiping that pack for Alliance specifically ends up wiping more people than probably most of the other packs inside of this dungeon. So if you can actually get through that without a hitch, you're probably good to go.
Yeah, so for Alliance, we recommend a Bloodlust there, and cooldowns and nuking the bomber. For Horde, we'd recommend saving your Bloodlust for the first boss generally. You can use it on trash. It's not the end of the world to use it on an early trash pull. You don't need it for the boss, but the boss is where we kind of find that it's the most effective, because you want to shorten that encounter. Bloodlust is generally a little bit more effective on, like, all other things being equal, you'd rather use it on single target than AoE generally. Most classes scale a little bit better on single target with haste than they do in AoE settings. So if there's not like a lethal big trash pull you can do, then using it on the first boss is often kind of the default. And I think that's the main reason that we see it usually used on boss from Horde side. As far as Horde side trash goes here, nothing here too difficult. The Vanguards and the Marksmen are potentially lethal, but they can both be interacted with pretty effectively. The Vanguards do like a frontal, but that's aimed at the tank always, so you can just face that away from your group.
And you can sidestep it as a tank as well.
Yep. And then the Marksmen shoot people, but you can stun them. You can gouge them if they're shooting at somebody who's low. You can have people use defensives when they're being targeted. You can
also line of sight as well. There's like random pillars and shit that you can actually use to line of sight. I know the opposite side pack, like the side closest to the wall, a lot of people will end up tanking it toward the marksman towards that wall area, just so you can dip in and out of line of sight really easily. So those are always things that you can do as well if you're really worried about your healer not being able to keep you up, or if you're worried about your survival in that pack, because those marksmen can be pretty nasty.
Yeah, and depending on the affixes as well, right? Like raging. It's nice as well that there's line of sight there, because there's often this week, for instance, we have a Void Touched Emissary spawning there as well. So that makes an easy line spot for the Void. And then that's the first part of the dungeon for Horde. It's pretty straightforward. There are there are a couple mobs here that your strategy should change if you have like a mage in your group. And this is something that I see people sometimes. These wave tenders, all right, Kulturian wave tenders, they'll cast a watertight shell that is a damage reduction and then an explode at the end. And mages can actually spell steal this aura. So if you're playing with a mage in your group, it's generally good to let this cast go off so that they can spell steal it. I'd recommend adapting a strategy that actually does quite a lot of damage, so it's worth paying attention to and doing that. But other than that, there's not too much intricate going on here. You usually just kind of pull your way through. You pull most of these packs. It's possible to skip some of these packs early in the dungeon. You can shroud wherever there's an annoying emissary. You can shroud this pack of like marksman, wave tender, halberd, triple footman. That's something that groups sometimes are shrouding, and that works out fine. But you don't need to skip anything here. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
it's not mandatory by any stretch.
Right. In fact, if you want to see any of those packs skipped, the meta and the most recent MDI was to skip every single pack except the ones by the boss. So you can just watch any match and people will show you how to do it.
Yeah, although those are like double rogue and big coordinated speed bots and stuff that you may not have access to on live.
Some of them are tricky to skip though. Like if you want to skip the double marksman pack, I think it's the third pack in the instance. You have to like jump over the little barrel on the right of them so you don't face pull anything.
Yeah.
In case there's a Titan Back.
Yeah. Speaking of tides in the pack, these 2 packs before the first boss, on most weeks, there will be a tides in... So on one pattern, on 2 out of 3 weeks, basically, there will be a tides in one of these 2 pulls. And that can be pretty problematic, right? In one of these pulls, there's a caster. In the other pull, there's like this marksman. And even when there's not like anything important to stop, it means that you can't slow the footmen when they start to flee. And the footmen fleeing can flee into the boss and pull the boss, and that happens pretty regularly. So... the tides being there preventing you from slowing these mobs and stopping that from happening can be a pretty big problem. The good news is that, like many packs actually, in many dungeons, it's possible to pull without pulling the tides, without using a Ring of Peace as well. The Ring of Peace is very strong and lets you do this on many pulls, but here you can do it with just pulling the right mob. So here we have a picture of the first boss, the mobs near the first boss, and it's possible to avoid pulling this tides by pulling the farthest footman from it. So you just throw your axe at it, or you taunt it, or whatever, and the entire pack will run at you. And because of the way that Tides aggro works, Tides will only aggro when you directly aggro something that is near them. And often there is stuff far enough away from them that you can directly aggro those things. The rest of the pack will aggro by like friendship or whatever, and the Tides will not aggro because of the people near them or friendship aggroing or whatever.
Yes.
I think that's what it's called. Look, you know...
So, a lot of packs are like linked together. Where
exactly.
If you pull any mob in the pack, the rest of the pack will come no matter what. Some packs aren't. Like there's lots of stuff in Freehold where you can just pick one mob right out of the pack and the others don't care. But the tides are never linked to any pack directly. They always pull social aggro, is what people call it most of the time.
Or friendship aggro, you know.
Friendship aggro, yeah. That's the new one. I'll just say that. If you always go for pulling the farthest mob from the tides, oftentimes it'll work. It just won't come. You have to be angled it the right way so that mob doesn't run through or near the tides in any way. But that's all you got to do.
Yeah, generally, if something's like aggroed to you and it walks directly into the hitbox of a tides, that will cause it to aggro. But outside of that, you're usually in the clear.
Yeah, and in our 2 pictures, we have like the tides highlighted, showing that you're going to be pulling it with the boss. If you're not comfortable with pulling the pack separate from the tides, you should probably like spam an entangling root or use spammable CC to make sure that the tides is actually not inside of that pack at all. So, just because the Brackwater Blast from the Wave Shaper can be really fucking annoying, and it can actually kill people too. So you do need some kicks on some of these packs. Yeah,
and when you're planning to kill the tides by itself, sometimes it's a bit of a failure case to do this, right? To just fight a tides by itself. But sometimes there's not a better option. I think that in Siege, generally, there is a better option, but sometimes you're going to decide that the best thing to do is just kill the pack and then kill the tides. I would encourage you, when you're thinking about doing that, to instead kill the tides and then kill the pack. So, like, aggro the tides out, CC the 2 casters, and then kill the tides first, and then go into killing the pack.
That's a good strat, yeah.
The reason this is better is because it costs your healer 1 global every 8 seconds to keep the tides CC'd. So you're going to end up costing yourself, like, 6 or 7 globals, and you're going to have to, like, pull a bunch of mobs a ways away. Whereas if you just focus the tides first, you just have to get 2 CCs out on the other 2 targets, and then you can just kill the tides, and then you go into the pack. So that's a sequencing thing that I think the kind of the instinct is to do it the other way, is to kill the pack and then the tides. I think anytime you can, you should kill the tides and then the pack, if you're deciding to do that. Okay, so that's the first bit of the dungeon, the first bit of the Siege of Boralus. Then after the first boss dies, we've presumably gotten whichever faction we are, we've gotten our Bloodlust on cooldown. If we're Horde, it's probably a little bit later. Siege of Boralus is a 36-minute timer, right? So it is possible to get 4 Bloodlusts in this dungeon. However, that means that you have to Bloodlust pretty quick to on cooldown. You have like 6 total minutes throughout the dungeon where you can have your Bloodlust off cooldown and still get 4 lusts. And that's a pretty small amount of time. But it is, you have a little bit of wiggle room. Not that much, though. Generally, the strategy for this dungeon is 3 Bloodlusts instead. And then you put them in precise points. So you'll Bloodlust on the first boss. And then you'll use specific Bloodlust later in the dungeon. And you'll have it on cooldown, or off cooldown, but unused for longer. That's usually what the meta ends up being about, and we'll call out those Bloodlusts when we get to them. But it's worth noting that an alternative that is totally fine is just Lust on cooldown, and get your 4 Bloodlusts that way. And that it's viable. It may even be better. I'm not sure.
If you're doing the 4 Bloodlust strategy, I would say that your first Bloodlust should probably be that Halberd Marksman pack.
Yeah.
Just because that pack can actually be really annoying, and the Halberds actually have a pretty sizable amount of health.
Or maybe even the Halberd Marksman Wave Shaper pack before the Wave Tender pack before the first boss, like the bigger one that can skip.
But again,
the better for 4 less. You really gotta be quick about them on 4 less because even if you play perfect, the last less is going to come up for the last platform of the final boss, and you really want to use less on the second platform or the first platform instead.
Yeah, that's always a very true point. Yeah, but if you're Alliance, always use it on that Bomber Raider pack. It seems like
true.
We're not 100% sure. Obviously, we haven't tested this as Alliance ourselves, so we can't speak with super authority on what to do as Alliance, but that's what it looks like. From the clips I've seen of what that pack does, it seems like you just want to get that thing out of here as fast as possible.
Delete that mob.
Yeah,
that mob needs a nerf.
Yeah.
It's all I gathered from watching it. I was like, what the hell is going on?
Now, the first boss itself, CCing the trash is a good strategy. Nuking down the first 2 trash mobs that spawn and then CCing the rest of the trash for the rest of the fight is a good strategy for Horde side because there will only be 2 mobs to keep CC'd after you kill the first 2. For Alliance, if you keep getting waves of trash, you probably got to kill them. I don't know what you're supposed to do there.
I think the tank just needs to gather all the melee mobs that spawn and just keep them faced away from the group at all times. Like you just rotate in a circle around the room and just keep them facing outwards so that they don't have a chance of heavy slashing the party members in your group.
Makes sense. The boss here gets kited around by, it'll target a ranged. If you don't have a range in your group, it'll target a random person. So I've run into this before. If you're playing with a Holy Paladin or a Mistweaver Monk Healer, this can happen, right? Where it'll just target a random person in your group because those 2 aren't coded as ranged.
Oh no.
That is not that's unpleasant times for everybody involved. But the goal is to kite it into these bombs. Sometimes you'll get in the spot where the boss has been kited into bombs and there aren't going to be new bombs for a while, and it's not going to be possible to get it into a bomb. If it reaches the end of that charge, it'll start to hook the person in, right? And I see people get confused about what to do when this happens. Usually the right strategy is to just run straight into the boss if the boss is hooking you, and then get out of there, because there's a Steel Tempest that will then kill you if you're too close and do large amounts of damage if you're far.
Yeah, that's the Horde version of it. I think Alliance version, if I'm not wrong, you can actually dodge the ability that he does once he finishes his fixate cast. Like he'll throw his hook at you.
Hangman Noose?
I'm pretty sure you can sidestep it if I'm not
Oh,
wrong.
it's like a skill shot for Alliance?
Yeah,
that is bizarre. So. Okay, but for Horde, it's not. It's not avoidable. You'll just get hooked, and you'll have to go into the boss to trigger the Steel Tempest, and then away from the boss. If the boss starts a Hangman Noose cast and then gets hit by some of the artillery, which can happen, he will then do a Steel Tempest in the near future, all right? And he'll do it without warning. So anytime you see that pattern happen, it's time to get away from the boss until he does a Steel Tempest, all right? I see this kill people all the time because they're not aware of how that spell queuing works. But basically, as soon as the boss has started a Hangman Noose cast, he's promising to do a Steel Tempest soon. So that's problematic.
Even if he gets artillery.
Unless he hits a bomb right before, like... Yeah, he has to hit the bomb in order for the next spell to not be the Tempest. Right. So even if he gets broken up by the bomb, he's still going to Tempest anyway. Mm-hmm. Or broken up by the artillery.
The artillery, right. Because not all the artillery spawns bonds, but all of it will interrupt the boss for a little bit. Okay. Right. So that's the first boss. After the first boss, for Horde side, we start to have like these trash pulls that... These are pretty skippable as well. There is one of these Irontide Raider mobs that the Alliance has to deal with before the first boss, and we just... skip that. If you can just walk around. This mob you should basically always skip. The Irontide Raider. Right. Yeah. You go around the side here.
It feels so bad to say, like, Alliance have to fight so many of these mobs when we walk around it.
Alliance has no choice but to... Well, I guess they can skip here as well, this Raider, but there's some powder shots that need to be focused down in these pulls. They do a lot of damage, but they have not very much health, so apply your damage aggressively to them. And we get to this spot here as well, where across the bridge, there are 3 gutters in combat with footmen that you can actually get count from if you tag them with a ranged ability.
I also added a picture in if you want.
Yes,
I just added it a second ago.
Let's take a look at this.
Those footmen, you have to have like a 40-yard range, I believe, to tag. So usually it's the healer or a monk with crackling lightning or someone that can reach him across the wall.
Okay, yeah. So here we have a picture of these gutters across the bridge here with Archdruid TTV Tettles attacking them with his Moonfire. So you just... The goal here is you just tag the gutter, and then you get in combat with the footman, and the footman kills the gutter, just like usual, and you get count for free, and then you don't have to deal with the footman. They just chill out over there. So little bit of free and easy count available as you're walking by here. 3 gutters, 3 count. That may end up allowing you to skip something else later. One thing to do in this dungeon is to basically keep track of how much count you're supposed to have after all the gutters are dead that are on your route, because you may miss some. Some of them you might not actually get the tag on, and it's important to know that, because then you'll know how many extra monkeys you need to pull later.
All right, in general, like especially if you're actually killing gutters, if you're at like 100% even, I would recommend trying to pull like an extra mob. 100% even is not 100% even, especially with these gutters, where it's very easy for you to mess up and miss your count. Because if you miss count, then you spend so much time running back later on.
Yeah, so
it's really common for siege routes to be like 4 units over the total count it's needed, just in case something goes wrong. So it is really common.
Mm-hmm. And we would definitely recommend doing that generally. And be aware of the number of gutters you can miss, and be aware of when you reach this last spot here before the second boss, the last gutter. It's a good idea to just have an idea of how much count you're supposed to have at this point, so you can know, like, okay, if we get all the gutters we have marked, we're supposed to have 162 here, but we'll be okay as long as we have at least 158. And then you can check how much you have when you get here, and you'll be like, okay, we have 157, we need to add an extra monkey. And that's a good little check to have, so that you don't end up getting in this bad spot where you're at 99% and you have to backtrack from the third boss to the monkey area, because that costs you a minute instead of 30 seconds. Okay, so after we get past this spot where Tettles moonfires the things across the street, we find our first Ashvane spotter of the dungeon. And Ashvane spotters are like, this is kind of the defining trash mob of Siege of Boralus, right?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that. That it's pretty iconic for this dungeon.
This one in particular, the way that Ashvane spotters work is they'll like choose somebody in your group to start dropping circles under, and the circles will then drop artillery on those after a couple seconds. But that damages both friendlies and enemies. It's important to note that just like the gutters, you need to have tagged the mobs that die to these in order to get credit from them. Otherwise, you're not going to get enemy forces. So always make sure that you're not just killing things with circles, that you're at least hitting them with one ability. But here, this like spotter quadruple powder shot pull, usually what'll happen here is your tank will roll up in here, everybody else will stay back, and the tank will stop the shooting RP that happens. And then the tank will get the first circle on them because they're the only person in range. And then they will stand on these 4 powder shots and kill them all with that.
Yeah,
the spotter
DPS doesn't walk up at all. Like, they should literally stay back because the marksman will instantly kill them. It's pretty terrible.
Not only that, but the spotter also has a 60-yard range. So if people are even close to the spotter, it'll try to pick them over the tank. The tank's like last priority on its target list. So everyone has to be completely away from it on that pull if you want to do it cleanly and without risk. And then they'll for sure get the spotter artillery. You drop 2 on that pack, and then you can either roll or charge or leap whatever movement speed you have to the next pack and drop 2 more circles on that, if you're feeling really spicy.
Yeah, that's the fast way to do this. Alternatively, you can just have your whole group come with your tank, and then whoever gets the circles does it. But then you're going to have a lot of damage coming at your group from these powder shots for a couple seconds. And those can be pretty lethal if they all target the same person. So you'll need AoE stuns until they die.
I think it's interesting because Siege of Boralus has like probably the highest discrepancy between like top end players and then people who are just doing like pug level keys because of the Ashvane spotter too. Because top level groups will fucking wheel that spotter around the whole entire dungeon. Just not that one specifically, but the other 2 that you end up getting. But
yeah,
it's definitely an interesting dungeon.
And it's vital that you hit your spotter shots, right? Like if you're going to use the spotter and you're going to pull things, assuming you're going to kill it with the spotter, you need everybody to always be ready to get the circles on them and drop them immediately. Ideally, even the first circle, the one that spawns instantly, needs to be in position. So you should always be positioning like you're about to get the circles on you so that you can drop them. Because the difference between these powder shots living for 10 seconds and living for 2 seconds is a lot of damage. That's going to kill like 2 people in your group in a high key. So you need to drop the circles immediately on the powder shots and not just like have somebody who's slow to react and kill them with the 3rd circle instead of the 2nd or the 1st.
It's a hard art to learn too. A lot of these packs are dangerous, and you have to be in position ready for your artillery just in case it targets you, as well as living through like the melee mechanics that are there, the fronals, the banana whirls from the other area, all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a fine art, but it must be done. And then again here, Alliance has a little bit of a drawback. where these Irontide Marauders are instead of our Gutter Footman packs that we got on Horde side, so you get less count.
They get Marauders?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're also Marauders instead
They're,
of Gutter.
No, dude.
Yeah.
Poor Alliance in this dungeon, man.
Horde side, we just get Horde side, you can just roll up in here and clap, and you get like 20 free count just from the Gutters all getting insta-killed.
Yeah.
Footmen aren't free. They do a hindering cut ability that's kind of obnoxious and can kill people at times, but it's not as bad as Marauders, and we're getting twice as much count, so this is another reason why Horde is often favored here, is because you can get a lot more count from this area too.
That's true. Those Footman hindering cut abilities will one-shot a non-tank and high-level key. So you got to be careful with that at least.
Mm-hmm. Now we get to this pull here. This is a shroud you can do. This is as we're approaching the second boss. Now we have this this is the first time you'll see an Ashvane commander as you're jumping across this boat to the other side. It's possible to shroud this pack, and that's often a strategy that people will do because it's kind of an annoying pack. This is particularly bad on Bullstring because it's large, medium, and small mobs all next to each other, and there's not really a good way to handle that with Bullstring. This is a pack where you don't have access to an Ashvane spotter, and soon you will get access to an Ashvane spotter for the rest of the dungeon if you want it. So often you'll see people shroud this. Also to note, there's a Warlock gate available from the boat that you can take too and not need shroud if you have a Warlock in your group, but that would require you to have a...
You can actually... Yeah, you can skip this pack in a lot of ways. From that boat, you can ride a druid who has wild charge. You can take 2 people that way. Lots of classes can stealth pass, rogues and druids.
Yeah, I think speed boost, slow fall might even work.
Yeah, I think so. You can jump off the cannon and slow fall. I'm pretty sure you can't land a leap over there or a hook. It's not no path available.
I believe the goblin jump does work though. So Gob Squad.
Yeah, you could definitely do
That okay?
Look, man. Goblin utility. But yes.
8 non-goblin settles?
Yeah.
Nope. Nothing wrong with the short man.
That would enable a Shadow Priest to do that skip.
Yeah, and then the Shadow Priest can grip somebody else along. So, you're really cooking with gas. Yeah.
Oh, you could jump off the boat and get gripped onto the bridge by the priest. That'd be sick.
Yep, I've done that unintentionally during a shroud skip where I fell off and then the priest had to grip me up before.
Yes. Anyways, but okay, so if you do play that pack though, I feel like Alliance would need to play that pack just for count, right?
Yeah, or Alliance can maybe get a bunch of can just kill the entire build rat quarter perhaps with spotters. That might be the best strategy if you're Alliance. But you may need to play this because you've skipped so much earlier. If you're Alliance, you wanted to skip all the stuff at the start of the dungeon. So yeah, yes, maybe you do have to pull this pack if you're Alliance. It's not a catastrophic pack to pull. It's not the end of the world. It's a commander.
Slow is the issue. It's not that it's hard, it's that it's just slow.
Right. There's a wave shaper and a powder shot, and those are potentially annoying, but they're interactable with. The commander does a Bullstring shout that, without access to Blood Elf on Alliance side, is also going to really slow down how fast you can kill this group. But you might play a priest, so you can master spell the Bullstring shout.
You're already fucking Alliance, may as well play priest.
And they do play Shadow Priest actually quite a lot, Alliance side relative to Horde side for pushing groups. Actually, it's a fairly common spec.
There's that one group that plays that prop paladin Shadow Priest Demon Hunter team. Right?
Yeah, and
I think they're the top Alliance team.
That team's pumping.
Yeah.
So that's a strategy if you do end up pulling this pack. However, you may want to just go straight into the second boss, Dread Captain Lockwood's room. Dread Captain Lockwood's both factions look at the same thing here, which is a spotter, a cannoneer, 3 deckhands, and 5 marauders. Of note here, depending on the week, if this pull is really hard, or if there's this Void Emissary here, like there is this week, that you don't want to engage haphazardly, the Marauders are not linked to the other mobs in this pack, so you can pull the 5 Marauders separately and kill them first, and then you can go into the other pack. You just need to carefully tag individually the Marauders, and make sure you're not going to hit them with an AoE ability that will hit anything in the main pack. That may be worth doing. The Marauders have a pretty nasty Cursed Slash, that increases damage received, especially if you don't have a curse to spell. That might be something that you really don't want to deal with in the middle of this pull.
Yeah, that curse slash is interesting. It's dodgeable too. It's afflicted from their melee attacks, and so it's dodgeable and parryable and all that. And so sometimes if you're a tank, you might fight these 5 marauders and be like, I didn't take any damage. And then the next time you do, you get one shot by them. And you're like, why is that possible? Well, because you probably dodged or parried some of their slashes, or all of them if you get really lucky. And so it's a lot of variability. Just be aware and probably pop a personal on high keys there.
Yes. Then you are also looking at a Cannoneer. Cannoneer does a frontal. And actually, the deckhands here also do frontals, little frontals, at the tank. So positioning all of these mobs facing away from the rest of your group is very important. Everything in this pull can be killed by the spotter circles, except for the spotter itself and the Cannoneer. Throughout the dungeon, every mob takes damage from the spotter, except for spotters, Cannoneers, Ashvane Commanders, Bildrat Demolishers, and probably some of the stuff earlier in the dungeon if you try to do some back pull shenanigans.
Basically non-lieutenant mobs.
Yeah,
basically non-lieutenant mobs in general can be killed by this.
Void Emissaries don't take damage from spotters. Tide Emissaries do take damage from them.
They do,
yes.
Yeah. However, they prevent other mobs from being damaged by the spotter if they're within the range of them. So the spotter will hit the tides, but not the other mobs right next to them if the tides is alive.
Yep, that's a fun little story there.
Nice.
Yeah. So using the spotter to kill most of the stuff here, it means that you probably want to ignore damage on the deckhands and stuff and just kill them with the spotter and focus your damage on the Cannoneer. Then what you may want to do is keep this spotter alive for the rest of the dungeon. Or not for the rest of the dungeon, but for the monkey quarter.
Okay, so when do you decide to keep the spotter alive versus just like killing it at this point? Like what would be the differentiation between like your group is like keeping it alive versus leaving it?
Well, one of the nice things about keeping it alive is that you don't have to skip to this spotter to use it on the monkeys, right? You can just kill the front monkeys with this spotter and then skip afterwards.
Sure.
So if there's like a void touched emissary in the way that will prevent you from getting to your the new spot, the last spotter of the dungeon, then it's good to keep the second spotter alive instead. And also, like, it really doesn't add too much difficulty here. It means that you have a nice release point as you're working on these things, where if people randomly die, as they do to the mechanics of the first monkeys, they can release nice and close, instead of if you end up doing this, like, you kill all this stuff and you shroud to the last spot of the dungeon and then you plan to back pull with it, deaths are very lethal while you're doing that because you don't have a way for people to get back. So those are kind of that's the trade-off, I'd say.
Sure. I would also say if it's bolstering or raging, you keep that spotter with you pretty much 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Like there's no like real question.
Bolstering and raging, yeah.
Like double or triple effectiveness, basically.
Yeah.
Which is so good.
And on bolstering weeks, you want to aggressively bolster spotters intentionally so that they one-shot everything else. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to separately pull the mobs that cannot be killed by spotters, right? So like these Bildrat Demolishers later in the dungeon, you're going to want to fight those by themselves and then pull a bunch of stuff that the spotters can kill all in one shot. You want to avoid bolstering a Demolisher 7 times, basically, and not, having any counterplay to that at that point.
And if your strategy does also involve keeping that, like, if it's a bolstering week and you're going to keep that spotter alive for prolonged periods of time, you should probably take it out of your count.
Yes.
Because after Hadal, after you kill Hadal in general, you probably just like sack yourself to the spotter, let them reset, and then you release at Hadal's room, then you walk to Viq'Goth.
Some people don't know how to do this in MDT, but you can control click on a mob within a pack to remove it from your count. And so you'll see this in Siege routes often, is you'll see the spotter not actually marked for count because it's assumed that you're going to keep it for the rest of the dungeon and then intentionally die so that you drop combat with it and not bother killing it.
Yeah, but for less coordinated groups, I feel like any group that's not pushing 20s or in voice, there's no real reason to keep that second spotter alive, like the one that's next to Lockwood, right?
If you're in it
takes a lot of coordination.
If you're in a less coordinated group, you should probably just kill this spotter and then kill some monkeys at the start of this Bildrat quarter, and then skip to this spotter and keep this spotter alive for the third boss room, ideally.
That third spotter is really easy to keep.
Exactly, yeah.
We're going to get to that at some point.
We will get to that. But first, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of Dread Captain Lockwood. This is generally where groups will use their second Bloodlust, especially on Tyrannical. You'll want to use it not on pull, but and actually it's pretty bad if it's up on pull. That means you're probably making pretty bad time. But usually it'll come up at the start of the first or second time that she jumps off the ship, and then you can use it then to have it up for an entire phase while she's down. One thing that there's a lot of I would say misunderstanding about is how exactly the cannon circles work during this boss fight, right? This is something that there's some confusion about, and I've got a clip here from Tettles' stream showing exactly how these cannons work. So let's take a quick look at this. This is a nice little 9-second clip. Okay.
No. It doesn't cast on trace.
So you'll see there that there are 3 sectors, right? There are 3 sectors of places where the cannon swirlies come, but there are, so if you think about it like as the A, B, and C spawns of circles, sometimes, so it'll go like A, B, C spawn the circles, and then A, B, C shoot the cannons, right? It'll shoot in the same order, but sometimes B circles will be shot as part of the A barrage, right? And that can be really lethal, especially if it goes left, right, middle circles spawn, and then the left circles shoot, and it fires at some of those middle circles that just spawned. You might have just been standing there, and you might have like half a second reaction time. Basically, newly spawned circles can be immediately shot because the circles don't remember which side they were spawned by. They just get shot kind of pseudo-randomly if they're near the side when that side fires.
It's only those ones that are like kind of 50-50. You're not going to get shot like by like a far fucking cannon, like cross room or something like that. Like that's like not on the line. It's these like line ones that are like, who knows what cannon it should be shot from.
So where
you'll just like randomly die.
Let's do a little bit of analysis of this in this clip. All right, I'm going to pause this clip, and for anybody just listening along, the clip will be in the link. This is the one that says "Placid Crazy Ocelot Caparos." If you want to, if you want to see which clip is which. That's the one, all right? I love those clips, the clips, how they just make them so that you can read them out. Anyways, you'll see, all right, here's the first spawn of circles, right? The Tettles is in, and he's standing in one of the spawns. And then we have a second spawn of circles, which includes this one right here. And then the third spawn, and then the first shot comes out, and some of these circles that are hit by that first shot were actually spawned in the second spawn of circles. And that's the thing you need to watch out for. Nothing was too lethal here.
No. It doesn't. There's also that one that was shot by the middle cannon that was spawned from the first side too, which you just need to be kind of careful of. And it's just like, fucking die to just like random shit. It doesn't get tilting whenever it's like this. Like this is kind of easy to predict. It gets rough whenever Dratnos says like if it spawns the middle one first, it can get kind of hairy as to like what you're gonna like because you can just like randomly die and it's like that was
anytime you're on the left side of the platform. And the right is the third circles to spawn, you're usually going to be safe, right? Because nothing new happens right before the first shot. But if you're near the third spawn of circles, you might get instantly shot because there might be a surprise circle underneath you. So generally the safest thing to do is to go deep into the quadrant, or sorry, not the quadrant, but the sector of the first spawn of circles and find a safe spot there between existing swirlies, far away from that kind of neutral zone between sectors. Because there won't be new circles that can spawn under you, and so you won't get surprise hit by circles there. That's the strategy that I use, at least, for that boss.
Yeah, I just always assume that no circle is safe and that you pretty much always have 0.5 seconds before you're going to die to get out. Yeah. So I'm just ready to roll or transcend away or something to move out.
Yes, yeah. Having a fast reaction time as that third spawn happens, if the third spawn is anywhere near you, is definitely important to do. Have an idea of like where you can move that might be safe if your current spot becomes unsafe. So yeah, that's how that mechanic works on that boss. This boss has another slightly confusing mechanic called Gut Shot. This boss and actually Ashvane Spotters have this kind of weird set of rules about being slowed and stuff. Trell as a resident tank and controller of mobs. What exactly is going on with this mechanic of Gut Shot and evasive in general?
Yeah, so this boss has an ability, basically, if she's never slowed, she will leap away from you, and then if she's out of your melee range, she will then cast Gut Shot. Sorry, she'll just Gut Shot any chance she gets if she's both not slowed or in melee range with the tank. So you have to guarantee that you're always going to be close to her, so she doesn't just decide to do that, as well as keeping a slow on her or some kind of snare. Like some tanks have it by default. Brewmasters have Kick Smash. Paladins have Consecrate.
Is Thrash still slow?
Thrash is not slow. So
was that an artifact weapon? That was.
I think it was. Yeah, so unfortunate.
You can Ursul's Vortex or Typhoon it.
You can do that for initial slow on it, but you have to make sure that someone keeps a slow debuff on the boss at all times, or else she's just going to jump away and Gut Shot and probably kill someone. So if I'm playing my Baron and alt key, for example, I'll ask my rogues to pistol shot the boss every now and then and make sure. Well, I'll ask them to do it once on pull because they might not know to, but then after that, it's in the rotation, so they're going to keep the boss slowed. But anything like that, to just make sure the mechanic is taken care of is good.
If you have a monk in your group as well, when the boss is jumping off the boat, it's a really good idea to just throw a ring of peace right where she'll land, so that she doesn't. She has this habit of like landing and instantly firing off a gut shot, and you can stop that by putting a ring of peace there as she spawns. You can also do it just by very quickly being right where she lands, and so she'll be in melee with you immediately and slowed at that time. But the ring of peace is actually a super good way to avoid getting these gut shots out, because in a high key they hurt a lot. It's a very damaging bleed.
Yeah, she'll start casting like mid-air a lot of times. So she'll try to gut shot you like while she jumps off the ship. So if you have a way of interrupting that cast with a knock, that's super ideal. You can Typhoon her mid-air too if you're really on top of your game.
Yeah, and also you can dodge the shot. So if you're playing a rogue, you can like evasion it, or you can blade dance it if you're a DH. Those are also counterplays if it does target you. But now we're getting into the realm of like super tech, fast reaction button clicking. Okay.
Yeah.
After the second boss, we're now entering the monkey area here, and I think the monkey area is where there's kind of the most divergence in Shroud or in Siege of Boralus strategies among top groups. A lot of people have very different ideas for what to pull here. So
it's probably also the second most dangerous part of the dungeon, where your group is again more likely to wipe it. Because I think like after you get through the first boss trash, first boss shouldn't be too bad. All the way through Lockwood should be pretty easy, pretty smooth sailing, and then now we're getting these monkeys Demolisher packs, which can be dangerous in their own way.
Yeah, I would say the most dangerous trash of the dungeon is right before the third boss, like the very last trash of the dungeon.
Yeah,
but this trash,
that's the other deadly one, but this one can also be obnoxious in its own.
Absolutely. So Tettles, what's the strategy here? Why are people shrouding so often as they get to the Demolisher area?
Well, in general, just the Demolishers themselves are like. So they patrol around the whole entire room. Plus, there's also that if you don't have the spotter from the second area, you want to get that third spotter and just backtrack into the monkeys. But the Demolishers are just like patrolling around the whole entire area, and they have like just a ridiculous amount of health. There will be some affix that also doesn't allow you to pull the Demolisher into some things.
Bolstering is the good example of like you can't do big pulls that include Demolishers because bolstering.
Or just the tides is obnoxious as hell with the monkeys. What are the monkeys that do the viscous spit called? What are they?
They're Bildrat Pillagers. They're actually Murlocs. Yeah. That's a fun fact. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're lame.
Yes.
Yeah, these Pillagers are tough mobs. That frontal that they do, the viscous slobber, is something that will turn off certain movement abilities. Like you cannot press roll or chi torpedo if you're a monk and you have the debuff. It just turns it off. I don't think you can leap if you're a warrior. So really it hinders you. And then you also usually have a crusher in that, or a demolisher in that pool, and they're gonna do things for you to have to move out of their way, like the frontal or the fear. And having the viscous slobber on you really prevents you from being able to get out of that. So it's a tough combo. On top of the bananas that'll likely spawn right on top of you and stun you. These mobs are hard to tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I think it's just a combo of all three of those, because I think the pull that we see most likely done together, and it has that tides in it, like in the screen that what we're showing. I think it's just like a Buccaneer. Is that the actual name of that?
Yeah.
It's something that just Okay, so it's a Buccaneer, and then it's the Pillager, and then it's the Demolisher. And that is by far the most commonly done mob pack that is done together. So you're getting those bananas thrown on you, which if you actually walk into them, they stun you for 2 seconds. Then you have the Demolisher, which is doing the AoE fear, which if you get hit by that, I think it just one-shots you. I don't think there's like any recourse for living through that. And then you have...
I think so.
As long as you're the tank, you're going to die if you got AoE feared. If you're a melee DPS, you're just going to get feared for a bit.
And then
it does a lot of damage.
Oh, we're talking about the slam or the fear?
The fear.
Oh, okay.
The slam fucking insta kills you, I think.
I thought the fear didn't do any damage.
It does. It does a lot of damage. If you immune it with Berserker Rage, you don't take any damage though.
Yeah. I think it doesn't do any damage. I disagree, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
Maybe it changed or something. I swear it does. But another thing about the Pillagers,
I swear it used to. Maybe it doesn't anymore.
I swear I died to it.
They definitely. I mean, they have changed the ability because they gave it they reduced the range, right? And they gave it a projected texture on the ground.
An animation. Yeah, an actual animation.
So maybe at that time they changed it to not do damage as well. Because I know I like stand in there intentionally and get tremored sometimes and don't take damage.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so maybe it doesn't do damage.
You're probably right then.
I think it's just like just like the combination of all three of those mobs. Plus, if your tank is not very sick, he'll kill you with the frontal ability from the Demolisher too.
And the slobber, actually. Aiming the slobber at the group is a very commonly done thing by tanks.
So if you're not in a coordinated group, okay, so most high level groups will end up just like CCing the slobber with like gouge, fucking stuns, or just whatever else, right? And that slobber doesn't go off.
It'll
However,
recast
if you're in,
though.
like not a,
It recasts.
Yeah.
Though. You have to CC it.
so you kill it. You kill the
times.
pillager. Like the pillager is like the first monk you end up killing out of the whole group, though.
Yeah.
Because of
Well,
that.
there's a better way to deal with it. The pillager has his frontal cone, right, and it does a lot of damage and slows you and turns off your abilities. But if you stand uphill from it, if you walk away a little bit uphill and do what we call Z-axising it, just standing above the frontal cleave, you actually don't get hit. It'll go right underneath your character. And additionally, which I learned recently, you can stand inside of the pillager's model, and the frontal will go past you, and you don't get hit by it. And you can do the same thing on the third boss in here, the Hadal's frontal cleave, as well as a tank.
Yeah, so minimizing the effect of it by doing one of those strategies is a really good thing to do. Otherwise, it's not the end of the world if it just hits your tank. Like, it's pretty annoying for them. They'll have a hard time avoiding damage from the Buccaneers' whirlwinds and from getting out of the fear and stuff, but they can still probably do that. You might be able to,
Right.
depending on what you're playing, you might have access to like a Freedom or a Tiger's Lust or whatever that will help them as well. But yeah, it's a rough pull, right? And these pulls are all like, they're not free. So often people will just want to skip them and get access to the spotter as fast as possible. Depending on where the voids are, this may or may not be easy. There are 2 out of the 3 weeks there's annoying voids in the right? So on void week, there's a void here that you usually will need to either death skip or pull up to, and then once you kill it, you can shroud. On enchanted week, there is not a void in this area, which is very good news. And that is part of the reason that Enchanted Week is BIS.
That's why it's such a nice week, man.
However, on Tides Week, there is actually a void that really hoses all possible shrouds here, and it requires you to basically do a death skip instead if you want to skip here. So, that sucks.
That was shit. I forgot about how bad that one was.
Yeah.
That one is a bad void. And the MDI, the meta was to just stay in combat with that void for the rest of the key.
Yeah.
And just keep going.
That's fine, and it's as your rogues don't even have to stay in combat, right? Because they're vanishing, so it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyways, but yeah, so most of the time you end up killing those demolishers and those monkeys there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's by far the most common strategy.
You'll kill, yeah, especially in a pug, you'll just kill some and then shroud once you've got enough count to the spotter and go from there. Alternatively, you can use the spotter from the second boss to kill these things. That's a very good strategy. Or you can shroud to the spotter and then back pull monkeys and kill with the spotter, the third spotter, monkeys. That works too. But of course, on 2 out of 3 weeks, there's a void that makes that really obnoxious. So, play on Enchanted Week a lot and take a break during the other weeks. I don't know. It's kind of just always a good strat.
No, I think you can play that. You can play all these voids. All these voids are playable. You just have to really prepare. That one that's on Tides Week is by far the most obnoxious just because of where it ends up being. Like, it's in a choke point for some dumbass reason, but like, it's with as long as you don't have that Demolisher with you in that pack, it's playable. Because once you get the Demolisher in there with you, you're kind of fucked because you don't have enough space.
I think looking at that, I haven't done this very much on this week, but I would probably pull the monkeys upstairs away from the void, kill them off, and then go back down and kill the void with the Demolisher.
Yeah, that's on Tides Week, right?
Yeah, Tides Week.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with that is that like you don't have much space before you'll pull the spotters pack here to go up the stairs, so it's kind of sketch, but it's maybe doable.
Yeah, true.
The certifiably Tides is definitely the hardest for navigating that. That is pretty obnoxious.
The Void Week Void is actually not that bad, right? You just pull up to it, you kill the void, and then you shroud from there.
You kill that
Yeah,
man.
you're fine.
Yeah, no, you just kill that guy.
One other strategy you can do here, a cool little Tettle strategy, is, and we'll see this in a clip, involves the use of Grappling Hook. There are a couple of movement abilities actually that can pass over this normally impassable wall of flame here. So let's take a quick look at the strategy.
Tank.
I tried to wild charge over it. Turns out you can't even human form charge through. I'm sad.
So you'll see the 2 rogues there have a Grappling Hook over, and now they're going to get on multiple person mounts. And then from there you can just jump onto the multi-seater mount and you're good. And you can get across that way. That'll let you skip like the Void Week Void here. You can just kill the first pack that we were talking about, and then you skip over to the side here, and then you can shroud from there. So on Void you can avoid the void, as it were, very easily. So that's a little technique you can use if you have access to grappling hooks in your group. Then after we do all this, we get to the top of the stairs.
Spotter
The
marksman.
spotter and
Yes.
the four marksmen, or the four snipers, the four Ashvane snipers. These Ashvane snipers are very lethal. They're going to cast ricochets, they're going to cast shoots, and they're going to cast them very quickly and all linked up if you AoE CC them. A lot of groups will just kind of run into this group and then die, and that's bad. What you instead want to do is you want to CC as many of these snipers as you can. Usually 4 CCs is doable. If you have a rogue, that's 2 of them with Sap and Blind, and then you can CC with like Imprison, Para, Repentance, Polymorph, whatever. I think Polymorph actually breaks.
Hex.
But Hex, yeah. And then, so you'll CC all 4 of these. I think we have a picture, actually, of this as well.
Yeah, we do. Have
You can
pictures.
fear them
Yeah.
too, like a Vengeance DH Sigil. There's
Sigil
lots of things.
Misery. Hell yeah. That's the shit. That's the good shit.
So,
Yeah, the main idea is to definitely CC them. They do so much damage. It's actually crazy how many technical things there are in this dungeon. Like, not only are the spotters there, but the marksmen up throughout the dungeon are very lethal. You just CC them, and
Sucks ass. And basically, if you get double shot, like you're just like instantly dead. So CCing at least 1 or 2 of those marksmen is very advised. CCing all 4 of them and then just blowing them up with a spotter is the most optimal.
yeah, so we have a screenshot here
But
of, you'll see all 4 of these mobs are CC'd, and then there's this like Venn diagram of circles. Often what people will do, okay, there's a couple of mistakes you can do here. If you're not under the snipers and the circle spawns on you, that's really bad, right? Because then you're not going to hit them at all with the circles. If you're directly in the middle of them, you can hit them with the first 2 circles, but then you have to get out and you can't hit all 4 of them with your next 2 circles. So that's bad. So instead what you want to do is you want to stand at the side so that your circle will barely hit the edge of all 4 of them. And then you can go through the pack and drop your other set of circles, your next 2, on the other side. Because the way that the circles work is the first 2 circles spawn and then the first circle lands. So you can drop 2 circles in the same spot and then move. And then you'll drop 2 in one spot, 2 on the other spot, and you want to do them in this Venn diagram thing. And in case you don't see how this helps as well, the CC does not break from these circles damage landing. So you can just kill these snipers entirely without breaking their CC, but you do need to tag them or else you're not going to get credit at the end there. So right before they die, hit them with an AoE ability. Chaos Nova is great for this because it also stuns them and does damage.
Yeah, you need to use it like whenever they're at like 10%, they're about to get hit by the last artillery, you like pretty much have to AoE stun them with something, otherwise somebody's gonna fucking get just instantly killed by the snipers. So Chaos Nova, like Dratnos is saying, it tags them all and it gives you all any leg sweep, shockwave. Make sure, but you have to make sure that you tag them. Don't get too antsy with it. Whenever the mobs are at 20%, it's gonna be okay. Really, just like look at how much damage the spotter is doing with each artillery. Like for us in that screenshot, it's doing 15% per. Just kind of keep that in mind. That's like if they're sub 15%, you know you're gonna need to stun and tag them all right before the last artillery hits them.
Mm-hmm. And then you're gonna secure the count from it, and you're gonna keep this spotter alive. If it's a raging week, you can enrage it first. You can get it below 30%. Otherwise, just leave it at its 80% or whatever, and bring it on with you because we're going on an adventure with this spotter, right? And we are gonna kill the rest of the trash in the dungeon, these last packs before Hadal Darkfathom, using the spotter. The spotter can kill everything in this room except for Ashvane commanders, and there are 2 Ashvane commanders in this room. On bolstering, it's a very big challenge, actually, is dealing with these Ashvane commanders. What I found to be best is, like, you want to mass root the other stuff, kill the commander first, and then you can kill the other things with the spotter circles. That's my favorite strategy against these. But otherwise, you may need to just hard focus the commander and, like, CC the other stuff. I don't know. Using whatever CC you got. It's really annoying. That's the biggest challenge on bolstering, is coming up with a strategy for this room, because these commanders do just pull with the packs. But normally what you'll do on a non-bolstering week is you'll just run in, you'll pull 1 pack, you'll kill everything with the circles except for the commander, and you'll kill the commander, and then you'll do the same for the next 2 packs, and then you'll pull the boss, and you'll win the dungeon. So that's what you want to aim for, winning the dungeon.
But that trash is some ass too, and I think like we were saying earlier, I'm pretty sure that is like the hardest part of this instance, and that's probably where groups end up wiping.
Yeah,
or you lose the key the most.
Especially like
is this third boss room trash.
If you pull more than 1 pack at once, and it just kind of all comes, and you just die instantly, and you're trying to hit it all with circles, but you're gone in a heartbeat. The snipers.
What was it that Maddie Smite would say? I think that's wrong.
That's wrong. That is wrong. Correct. All the mobs here are lethal in their own right. Okay, the destroyers aren't lethal. The destroyers are fine. You don't care about those. But the invaders do a poison cast on themselves. Good DPS make this non-lethal because the way it works is invaders every like 10 seconds they'll coat their weapons with poison. If you stun them or gouge them or CC them during their cast, they do not recast. So you can prevent them from getting this poison on their blades. And what you should do in a coordinated group, what you will do is you'll assign a DPS to watch each invader and stop them from getting their poisons out. Outlaw Rogue's obviously very good at this because they can gouge and stun and stuff and have a million tools to deal with this, but many different classes have a tool for this, and you only need to do it for a little bit before they die to the circles, right? But a common reason for the tank to die here is that they just take too much damage from that poison, because that poison trucks.
Yeah, and they apply it on every melee attack. So even if you dispel, you're going to have 5 stacks pretty much instantly right after, and it's just unavoidable.
Yeah,
unless you kite,
kiting,
keep them far away.
Kiting or hitting a long duration stun on a mob if they do get this cast on themselves are good things to do. But the best thing to do is to assign somebody to just go and gouge it every time it tries to do a stinging venom coating cast, and that's a really big thing to do. Snipers are another annoying mob here. Often what'll happen, for instance, when you pull the pack that does have the one sniper and the one commander, is you'll be fighting like commander, destroyer, invader, and you'll be fighting them down the pathway a little bit, and the sniper will just be like near the top of the pathway, taking pot shots at your whole group here, and doing a lot of damage. So that's something you want to avoid. Usually what you want to do is you want to try and pull the group onto the sniper once it gets in position there, or line of sight so that the sniper is forced to come to you.
CCing your spotter with an entangling root here is also pretty good, because otherwise, if your tank has threat on the spotter, then the spotter will literally just like follow the tank to the ends of the earth into Hadal's room, and if it does that, you're fucked. So you're gonna need a root.
Yeah, and the spotter can melee is pretty hard, especially if you're planning to rage it or bolster it. You just walk next to the spotter. I don't know. Sometimes you have it 20 times bolstered, and you just walk next to it, and just your tank's gone. One hit.
Help, my healers pulled healer threat. He walked too close to the spotter, got instantly killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty common. Because tanks don't touch it after a while, and it'll just switch aggro eventually.
There are some problematic tide spawns in this room. On Enchanted Week, for instance, last week, we saw this pattern where there was a tides in the pack with the invader, sniper, commander, destroyer. This is another example of a pack where you can pull without pulling the tides if you target the farthest mob from the tides. So in this case, it is this farthest away invader that is not within proximity aggro range of the tides. So you just hit that thing with a taunt or throw your axe or crackling jade lightning or whatever the heck you got, and the rest of the pack will come running at you and the tides will stay there. And then again, this tides you can just pull onto the boss. Pulling tides onto boss, tides do quite a bit of damage, so if you're dying to the boss, like this week, doing a tides with Hadal might be rough given that it's necrotic and tyrannical. But last week when it was fortified and not necrotic, you can probably get away with that pretty safely. So it was a pretty good thing. Tides, all things considered, are least impactful when fighting bosses as compared to fighting trash. So that's a good time to deal with them. Just cleave them down on the boss, and it gives your Outlaw Rogues wit stacks too. So you'll have to see that.
Also important to note that pulling Hadal and resetting him will pull all the trash. However, there's some ways that you can pull Hadal where it doesn't pull the tides. I know Trell was telling me about this earlier, but I guess it requires Hadal to be in like a really specific spot for you to not pull the emissaries with. So there's going to be some research going on eventually with that.
There's one week where there's 2 tides in there, and if you pull Hadal at the exact right location, I still don't know exactly where it is, but it happens sometimes, where if you pull him right there in that spot, then all the packs will come and both tides will stay out of combat. And it seems like there's some kind of wide aggro radius from him. Like, since he's a big model, his aggro radius is really large and might hit the tides when you first tag. And so I think he has to be like exactly between the 2 tides nearest the entrance of the room. And if you snag him out right there, you're good.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly how. Like, I have not been able to do it reliably myself either, pulling Hadal without pulling the tides, but I've seen it done sometimes. So yeah,
we did it twice, but one time we fucked it up and we didn't know why, and then we wiped. So
yeah, that's a pretty common experience, I think.
Tough.
So
that's one of those like really advanced things that you probably don't need to worry about, but it's good to know.
So do you think that there's ever a reason on any effects that raging or bolstering or anything where you would double up those packs at the top of the screen, or do you think that you always just take this room 1 pack at a time?
I think this is a spot where you have to look at the timer and see how quickly do I need to pull this to beat the key. If you need to do that to win the key, then go for it. Like if you're short on time, then you need to pull the 2. Like you need to pull the commander, the small commander pull with the non-commander pull, and do it in 2 instead of 3 in this room. But otherwise, doing it in 3 pulls is way safer than doing it in 2. So if you have any reasonable amount of time on the clock, I would rather like push it with my strategy on the last boss and try and like hard commit to grippings sooner than do this room in 2 pulls as a rule. I don't know what Trell thinks though. Trell, do you like pulling a lot in this room?
It's definitely dependent on affixes. Like Tyrannical, I think I would still do the whole room on a high key for time and cleave down everything as long as it's not bolstering. If it's bolstering, you
the
have to.
whole room. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think on Tyrannical to do like the highest level key. It's hard, but it's doable.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's very sketchy though, and I would not recommend it to people trying this at home.
The problem with this room is there's two targets that have a ton of health, the two commanders, and you have to either pull it all at once, so you cleave them both down at the same time, or you do it in 3 separate pulls and do like one commander with its pack and then pull in the 3 pack in the back while the commander's still being worked on. And that's technically a second pull, but it all dies within the commander's health. And then you do the second commander with its pack after. That's like a fortified strategy.
Yeah, that's an aggressive chain, which is nice.
Yeah, I like that chain. As soon as the commander's friends are dead, don't just fight the commander by itself, but pull the non-commander pack. That's very smart.
And I think that's probably the best strategy overall. Like without affixes in mind, you should probably plan on doing that. Even on Tyrannical, that's almost as good as pulling the whole room, as long as you are safe about it.
Right, but you're saying that on Tyrannical, on high keys, you need to make up time because the bosses take so long, so you need to do the room all at once and kill it all with spotter? Sometimes?
I think so. I might be wrong about that with the current timers, but I think you have to do that on the highest Tyrannical keys for Siege, like a 23 or a 24 right now.
So currently we are sitting with the Raging Necrotic Tyrannical week, which should seemingly be okay for Siege of Boralus. Would you pull that whole entire room with Raging Necrotic?
I would. The spotter raging is actually a huge benefit, and if the DPS are well versed in how the mobs move into that area, they can actually drop the circles ahead of where the mobs will be coming in, and actually take some of them out almost like completely without the tank taking any damage.
Anything even happens.
Yeah, it's so important to kill these mobs with the first set of circles. If you kill them with the second set of circles, you're already dead. So you need to. If you're pulling the whole room, they need to die to the first set of circles. Everybody in your group needs to be in position for if they get the circle on them. That's the most important thing with this room.
It is, and tank CDs only last 8 to 10 seconds usually. That they're big cooldowns that they use to live, and after that, usually they're pretty dry and they're going to get destroyed on these packs, especially on necrotic. So, if you're a brewmaster, you pop like fortifying brew and dampen at the same time on pull with all this stuff. And then as soon as it runs out, you use everything you can to keep the mobs there and run.
And dampen. Oh my fucking god!
Yeah.
Dude, prop pallies actually have it really easy though. You just Ardent Defender on pull. As soon as that pops, you just bubble, and then out of the bubble, you use the rest of your stuff. You got 30 seconds. It's nice. It's
yeah, that is really
prop
good.
pally's so good this week actually.
You can immune the spotter stuff too. That's actually really strong. You can just stand right in the spotter,
and you bubble taunt everything onto you in there as well, so that you don't have these threat problems or anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most people don't play with the prop.
It's an overpowered spec. It's insane.
Anything that can safely keep these mobs in the spotter circles are extremely high value in Siege. Trees from a boomkin is massive. Vortex is really good. Ring of Peace is really good. Anything similar to those.
Everybody in your group should, if you have a knock or whatever, even a knock belt, you should be looking at moving mobs that are not in the circles to the circles. So a good druid will be moving around and typhooning. Tettles will be just sitting in the back, starfalling or whatever.
Sometimes you play Mass Entangle.
True, yeah, true. That,
as a druid,
and that's good too.
It really just kind of depends. What's going on.
But if you do have Typhoon, if you have Thunderstorm, if you have Engineering Belt, you should be looking to get that sniper that's normally a problem into the pools, right? That's a really useful thing to be doing.
Shining Force.
Shining Force, cool. Yeah, that'll send. Okay, you cast Shining Force on this mob here, and it will just go on an adventure over to about here in the second boss room.
Same thing with Thunderstorm, honestly.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with those abilities. They send mobs really far, and they'll spray the mobs out in an arc.
You need to be really careful with your positioning actually with those, because they're so high power that they can just send them to different places, and you're trying to group mobs, not spread them. So.
Anytime you want to move a group of mobs, you don't want to spread them out in an arc. You want to keep them clumped, but just move their location.
Yeah.
So you'd use the edge of the ring of peace rather than the middle of the ring to split. You just carefully move them.
And with Thunderstorm or Shining Force, you should try and be as far away that we'll still hit them as possible. Be far away from the mobs, knock them right into a wall or a corner. That's a really good strat to avoid having them spread really far. Yes. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the Hadal fight and then the Viq'Goth fight, and then we're done with this dungeon. So we just got 2 boss fights here at the end. The Hadal fight this one actually hurts tanks pretty hard with its autos. Not if you're Brewmaster, obviously, because Brewmasters don't take damage on single target, but every other tank does get hit very hard by Hadal. So that's an important thing to be aware of on Tyrannical. Hadal has a couple of like space denying things that can get you in trouble. You'll often have these spots where like one of the 4 sides of the room will be really bad for you if the waves spawn from there. And your goal is to minimize the chance of that happening, right? Your goal is to make it so that 0 of the 4 sides are actually lethal if they spawn there. So to do this, you want to try and point the crashing tides out of the room, like in the corners of the room. It's a good place to aim those instead of towards the middle of the room, and then you're going to cut off people's routes to safety from the waves. The swirlies that spawn from breakwater, it's a good idea for your melee to all be stacked up on each other so that you spawn multiple swirlies in the same spot and deny yourself less space. And it's a really important thing to not be playing too close to this fountain when you're in the phase before the wave spawn, because you don't want to spawn swirlies there. You don't want to pollute the ground there.
I want to apologize to all the tanks that I've ever played with. I stand by the fountain because I'm toxic.
Yeah, if you're one ranged player and you're doing it, it's fine, but it's bad when the whole group is doing it. Because that, denies all the space. One tough overlap as well is right after the first waves, the boss will then send a frontal at the tank, and that can be very space denying. If it's from the opposite side of the room, it can send it like a big line right through the middle of the room. So a good thing to try and do there if you're the tank is to actually stand as far away from the fountain as possible as those waves are rushing by, and then you'll make the angle shallow enough that there's space still near the fountain. Whereas if you stand right up next to the fountain, then the boss will cut right through the fountain, and that's bad with the crashing tide there. And then the other thing with that...
Warn your group that the frontal's coming too. A lot of times they'll forget that he does that right after the big wave and be like, hey, just strafe a little bit here. The frontal's going to go right through the entire group like it always does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. And then the tank frontal also, as Trell was mentioning earlier, you can just stand in the hitbox of the boss and you'll dodge the tank frontal. So that's a useful thing to do if you're the tank. If you don't want it, like you can just keep sending it on the same position and just stand in the same spot and never move by just getting right into the boss's hitbox. So good strat there.
It's also a sidesteppable frontal. A lot of things are frontals that fix it on the aggro target, but some of them are sidesteppable where you can move out of it after they start casting, and some of them aren't. Like the pillager in this instance is not sidesteppable. They'll keep facing you as you rotate and then fire at you. But like this boss and some other things are sidesteppable where once they start the cast, you can just walk out.
Yeah.
Cragmaw indigestion. That shit is dumb. I literally had no idea that if you just like start back, like if you start walking away at like 0.5 seconds before he starts casting, you just walk out. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was fun to learn over the first weeks of season 1. Yeah.
Dude, what the hell, Travis? I thought we were friends.
Hadal is a fight that you can bloodlust, right? You can bloodlust this fight, but we usually prefer to save it for the last fight because the last fight will save you more time, because the last fight is a fight where using bloodlust can save you spawns of tentacles. So usually we'd recommend not bloodlusting Hadal. We'd recommend your first lust on the first boss, or trash if you're Alliance or whatever, your second lust on the second boss, or on this trash pull right after it, and then your third lust usually should be on Viq'Goth. That's what we'd recommend.
Hadal's just dumb as hell because he just like stands there and doesn't really like, if as long as you're not getting swung around and frontaled by your tank, the fight's really easy. Mm-hmm. So I think it feels like kind of a waste to bloodlust him just in general. Yeah,
I think a good reason to bloodlust him is like if your tank is dying to the front to the autos, which can happen depending on what tank you're playing with. Like I think Blood Death Knight might be one such tank where you're just like, the fact that you don't have any armor and you're just getting pounded on every auto for like 75% of your health is a pretty rough spot to be in. Prop Paladin, also does hurt.
A shame.
So bloodlusting this fight because you want to get through it faster for that reason is a reasonable thing to do, but otherwise I would save it for Viq'Goth. And Viq'Goth is a fight that I think is among the least understood by like the general WoW populace of all. So let's start with Viq'Goth. Viq'Goth, the basic idea is that there's one gripping tentacle and then 1 to 5 Demolisher tentacles per platform. There are never more than 5 Demolishers on a single platform. After you kill the 5th Demolisher, no more will spawn on that platform. So the most conservative strategy is to just focus Demolishers until all 5 are dead, and then focus the gripping, and go around the platforms that way. That's a very slow strategy.
Terrible.
Yeah. But you can do that on one of the platforms, for instance, and then use your cooldowns on the other 2. That's a strategy you can use. You have a Bloodlust to assign somewhere. Basically, what you should do is you should come up with a way where you can hard commit to a gripping, because as soon as you kill the gripping, the Demolisher timer stops as well. Demolisher spawn every 20 seconds, and that's a strategy, right? So, Trell, what's your favorite strategy to approach Viq'Goth with?
Oh, it's always hard to say because this totally depends on the key level you're going to do. You got to gauge how fast that your group can kill both the gripping tentacle all in one go if they all focus it, or how fast the demolishing tentacles will die because they scale pretty out of control once the keys get higher. So on the 22 fortified setting last week, we killed all 4 demolishing tentacles on the first platform, and then the 5th spawned, and after that they don't spawn anymore. So the tank tanks the 5th tentacle while the group finally kills the gripping tentacle, the one that starts on the right at the beginning of the counter. And after that, you move to the second platform and use Bloodlust and cooldowns, and you kill the demolishing. You kill the demolishing tentacle on the second platform first, and then you use Bloodlust and cooldowns to kill the gripping in the back, because the timer doesn't start to spawn more demo tentacles until you damage the gripping tentacle in any way.
This is only on the second and third platforms, right? But this is little known piece of information. As soon as you tag that gripping, if you sunfire it or whatever, you start the timer on that second Demolisher. But if you kill the Demolisher without hitting the gripping, you will not start the timer on the second Demolisher, and that will allow you to kill Demolisher, hard commit to gripping, second demo spawns, and then the tank runs and grabs that, and then you kill gripping before the third demo spawn, and you're good.
And for lower level keys, you can actually just assign somebody 20, like the 100% of the time, just like sit on top of the gripping, and the other 2 DPS in the tank can kill the Demolisher. I think that seems like a pretty common strategy for lower level keys, and it's probably fine as long as you have the right person assigned, or that third person, if they realize that you're not going to kill the demolishing, they probably should just get off of the gripping.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to have some awareness as to what's going on as well.
Yeah, you got to gauge like how fast things are dying and whether you should help or not if you're splitting damage like that. But the goal of this strategy that I was talking about is to kill the second platform gripping tentacle before another demolishing tentacle spawns, or rather a second demolishing tentacle spawns, so that the tank can take care of it while everyone finishes the gripping. And then after that, you move to the last platform and you kill the demolishing tentacle that starts the same strategy as the second platform to not start the timer on the rest of it until you then engage the gripping tentacle without the demolisher present, with lots of time to kill it off before a bunch start spawning and wipe the raid.
Yeah. Usually on that third platform, people will hard commit to that gripping because it's fine if things go a little bit scuffed at the end of that platform. If 2 demos spawn for a little bit, you can survive for a bit and kill the boss still. And there are some good spots where the tank can tank a demolisher and still hit the gripping, which is nice. And that on that third platform. So usually groups will do that. Sometimes groups will like save Lust, Combustion, second pots for that third platform and kill the gripping like twice as fast as they need to. What we'd really recommend is actually moving your Lust and Combustion to the second platform in that spot, or Combustion the first platform and Lust second pot the second platform, and then Combustion the third platform, something like that. Don't use everything on the third platform. Try and actually push on the second or the first platform as well, and then you'll still have a lot on the third platform.
Yeah, like something with Incarn, like I literally Incarn on pull, and then I just let Bloodlust ride me out second platform, and then I Incarn again third platform.
Mm-hmm. And it depends on the groups the players you're playing with. Like if you're actually playing double Fire Mage or whatever, or like a single Fire Mage even, this is still a very easy boss because Combustion is so effective at nuking these grippings. So this is a really good dungeon for Fire Mage.
Yeah, true.
And for like Assassination Rogue or any bursty class that has like a 2-minute cooldown, you can very easily burst grippings, and that's a nice like burstiness is a good characteristic of damage on this fight. But yeah, doing that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how the Demolishers work, because obviously if they're not being tanked, they're going to Hullcracker. But one thing that people don't know is that they actually they'll spawn, they'll AFK for a little bit, they'll melee anybody who's next to them, but they'll AFK for a little bit, otherwise they won't do a Hullcracker. Then they'll do their first slam, and then after that first slam is when they will start casting Hullcracker. So if you're the tank, you can stay on the gripping until that slam is done, and then you get over there and you get in melee with it before it would Hullcracker.
Yeah,
it's important. Sometimes people like panic, like DPS players will like panic taunt it immediately as soon as it spawns and like go over there, and that's not the right thing to do. You have like 10 seconds between them when they spawn and when they will do their first Hullcracker, and you should use it if you're in that kind of tough spot. Like particularly, this is the tough spot. Like you hard commit to a gripping and you're a little bit short, and 2 Demolishers are up at the same time. You want to just focus one, wait for the other one to do its first slam, and then you send somebody over to taunt it with parry or whatever for 10 seconds, and that's as long as you need, hopefully.
Yeah, true. I agree with that.
All right.
I try to milk a lot of my tank damage. Like on the gripping tentacle, I'll stay on it as long as I possibly can, and then roll back to the Demolishing Tentacle right after it finishes its frontal, like Dragonus was.
Yeah, the tentacles are stunnable as well, which is good. Like if the gripping is also stunnable, which is not, it doesn't help with much, but it's worth noting if you have an Outlaw Rogue in your group that they can apply their 10% damage taken increase to it with Prey on the Weak talent. So like Vanish cheap shotting that thing right when you're starting fighting it is a good thing for everybody's openers on it. 10% extra damage.
You can cancel Hullcracker. You can cancel Hullcracker with
stuns as well, yeah.
With stuns as well, yeah.
So canceling slams that are going to be problematic. Canceling Hullcracker is a good thing to do as well. The Dispel mechanic on this fight does hurt quite a bit. So
that shit sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having like a strategy, usually what you want to do is like if it targets a rogue, they cloak if they have it, and you dispel the other person. If you have a priest in your group, Mass Dispel pretty big for this actually.
Diffuse magic.
Yep.
You can diffuse magic it, but it doesn't like really do damage to Viq'Goth, but it does do the dispel.
If you have an AMS or something in your group, like a AMS spell warding, you can see when it's flying at you, and those cooldowns prevent the application, but they don't actually remove it. But you can see the spit flying at you, and you can AMS before it hits you, and then it won't apply to you. But you can't AMS after you get the dot and remove it that way. That doesn't help. It'll just prevent some damage on you. So if you're playing one of those specs that has access to something that prevents application but does not remove a debuff, then looking for those spits is a good thing to do. And you can see who they're going on, right? Usually what you can do is you can strafe a little bit and see if the spit strafes as well, and then you know it's targeting you.
Yeah, and save your cooldowns as a tank to when you're going to get a debuff, just pop one of your CDs. You don't need it for anything else in the fight. The tentacles don't hit very hard, but definitely mitigate the healer's job by taking care of some of those dots on your
Right, tank should be the last priority for dispels, and they should use their defensive cooldowns instead to cover the distance. All right, I think that's everything we had on Siege from ourselves. The lust timing question actually did come from our Discord, so thank you for asking us about that there. We do have some more Q&A here. That there were some Siege-based questions and answers that we just kind of added into the show. And then we have some kind of general Q&A that we thought was particularly good, so we wanted to get to at the end of our show here today. So the first one comes from Leno via Discord, who asks, health scaling, multiplied by Tyrannical, made the fourth boss into like an 8-minute fight on 21s and 22s, which is way too long in my opinion. What's the solution to make it shorter but just as engaging as it is right now? So this is talking, I think, about the Siege last boss as well. Trell, what do you think about this question here?
I think this is a good question. I hate that this boss turns into such a long fight on Tyrannical, and it's caused by it being a phase kind of boss where there's like phases in between the important boss damage, which is the gripping tentacles. So each time a demolishing tentacle spawns, it has a ton of health on Tyrannical, and you need to take them out one at a time in order to beat the next spawn timer 20 seconds later. And this kind of fight has so many of those little mini phases that it just scales out of control. Like the higher the key goes, the harder it is to squeeze in damage in between phases. And so if they were to reduce like the amount of health that those tentacles gained from Tyrannical and key level at least a little bit, I think it would help the scaling issue. Maybe or rather than that, they could remove 2 total tentacles, like maybe make 3 the max per platform or something.
Do you remember when they were bugged to only spawn like 2 per platform? We were just like, holy shit, thank God. Did this change?
We thought they fixed it. We thought they fixed the scaling issue.
Yeah, that was actually that was an amazing week. Yeah.
That was a swift bait, but yeah.
But yes, I think tyrannical scaling on phased encounters is a big problem. You see this on other fights as well, like Kragmaw the Infested, Yasma.
The second boss in Siege as well with the ad phase.
Second boss in Siege, like last boss in Temple. There are these kind of bosses that just take like increasingly long per, like you increase their health by 10% and you increase the length of the fight by 30%. That kind of stuff.
Merekth's
cool
because
I like Merektha because
Merekthha is bad on Tyrannical because you get the Strikers and the Ophidians at the very end, whereas on Fortified you don't deal with them at all. However, on Tyrannical you have them for like 25% of the encounter. You're just like, holy shit, please God, get me out of this fight.
Yeah,
that's true.
I like where Tyrannical, like I'm fine with Tyrannical, meaning that like on 20s you have to deal with an extra phase that you don't normally have to deal with, like that's unique to a fight. Like I actually don't mind Merektha, like it's kind of a cool affix, right, to have this, okay, like snakes are going to spawn in a Merektha encounter at the end. But I don't like it in the Siege way where it's like, okay, you know, instead of having the DPS to push, you don't have the DPS to push, so you have to do all the destructors, and that's, I think that's lame, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the worst example of a phasing boss scaling out of control with Tyrannical and key level this.
Yeah. All right, our next question comes from @KinFTW1, who asks, "Can you explain the skip after the second boss, please?" So yeah, this was the. I guess we got to this one during the episode. I should have mentioned it then, but yeah, that's where we have the weird outlaw skip with the grappling hook. That's where we have the shrouds as well. Just the monkey platform, the monkey skips. And again, the main reason is because monkeys are hard to fight, and getting access to a spotter really quickly is high value because spotters make the whole dungeon easier.
Most of the time you end up backtracking too. Yeah. So there's a lot of random shit.
If you're a demon hunter, you can somehow fly over that entire area. If you're
Yep. Evade can fly over everything. He's like Superman. All right, Weep on Discord asks, "I've observed that Essence of the Focusing Iris seems to be a lot of people's default for M+, but have recently heard streamers questioning its use. When is a good idea to use it? Is it class-specific? Affix-specific? It does depend a lot on your class. Like for some classes, it's just this. It's the best thing to run in M+. Demon Hunter, for instance, Havoc Demon Hunter is a good example. Like Essence of the Focusing Iris is just the best thing that they have to run, generally, regardless of if they had access to everything. For a lot of people, though, they'll run Essence of the Focusing Iris because they don't want to grind Blood of the Enemy if that's the best thing for their spec, or because they don't have access to whatever the best thing for their spec is. Like Outlaw Rogues, for instance, Blood of the Enemy is the best thing to run. Assassination Rogue, Blood of the Enemy is the best thing to run. But Focusing Iris isn't that much worse, and it doesn't cost 30 hours of your life to get access to. And so that's why you'll see people using it in M+, instead. Yeah. Affix specific is better on Fortified than on Tyrannical. On Tyrannical, you might consider things like Crucible Flame or Condensed Life Force, depending on what your spec is, or Vision of Perfection if you're a spec that likes Vision and scales off that. For Tettles, I know Boomkin are just like always Vision, right? That's your main thing in keys, right?
I think Gape's been playing like Iris only, but I don't. I still need to see more. TBD.
TBD. Yeah, it seems Iris might be like a Fortified choice, and Vision might be a Tyrannical choice or something like that.
I don't know. It's kind of awkward because Vision puts your incarnate like 230 or something like that, which is really optimal for Fortified bosses because you
get it
most
right
of
at
the
the
time
end.
will end up getting 2 uses. So it's awkward in the sense of like, but at the same time, Moonkin also doesn't have really good AOE, so. I don't know. For balance, it feels like it's more patty than it is effective damage, but it's still TBD. I'm not sold either way.
But yeah, it definitely class specific. Focusing Iris, yeah, I think that's
for sure. Yeah,
describe it. All right.
It's also dungeon specific. Like like stuff like a Taldazar or Waycrest Manor gets way more value out of it.
A Taldazar with the swords, yeah, because beaming down the swords really quick is a nice thing to do. Anytime you're going to pull big and beam it, like Shrine of the Storm, right? The eel or the Lasher packs before Lord Stormsong, having beams or stuff in your group that do AoE damage instead of like Condensed Life Forces or Vision of Perfections is a good thing to have for those.
True, yeah. Burst damage, nice for dangerous short pull.
Mm-hmm. All right, that is all the questions that we have picked out for this week's show. We hope that you've learned something about Siege of Boralus. Again, we're continuing to kind of work on this format of dungeon shows. So we received a ton of great feedback last time when we did the Taldazar one, and we hope we've made some improvements. But of course, it's still an iterative process. We're still learning how to best make this kind of content for you. So let us know what sorts of things, particularly like if you're an audio listener, what sorts of things didn't work for you. Hopefully, the links in the description do help a lot. If you like the video, or if there's something that you also want to see in the video, let us know those sorts of things as well, and we'll try and keep improving this style of episode because we got a lot of good feedback about it. If you're interested in helping pick which dungeon we do next, probably in the next couple weeks sometime, the next month or so maybe, hop in our Discord, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Titanforge, and the Discord link should be below in the description wherever you're watching this or wherever you're listening to this as well. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll be back next week live. We gotta still nail down the exact specifics of like if we're gonna be on our regular time, but our theory is next week live. Check us out on Twitter @TitanforgeWow, where we'll announce it for sure. But that's all for us this week. Bye, everybody.
Later, gamers.
Till next time.